Kevin Weiss at bodyperformance.net, and we're about 10 weeks out, including this week, out from the Western Canadian bench press and powerlifting championships, and this is week 5 of the program. So I want to dive into it right away here. I don't want to spend too much time just going over the individual lifts and the numbers, which I've done in the previous weeks, because now we're getting far enough into it that I can actually compare some of these numbers to the other numbers and develop some sort of flow, if you will, to what's actually happening, showing how in this first phase where I've been trying to do a high level of volume and a relatively moderate level of intensity, and as we go from week to week, especially in the next say 4 or 5 weeks, you'll start to see a trend of where that goes as you try and switch from a volume phase, a hypertrophy phase, into more of a strength phase, into more of a peaking phase. So let's get right into it. I started with a pause bench press on the July 13th. I did a 147.5 kilo single with that, and then I followed that up with 8 sets of 5 reps with 135 kilos. And then touch and go bench presses. I did 127.5 kilos for 6 sets of 7 reps. So if you're interested in the volume numbers for each individual lift, it's going to be on the PDF, so you can check it out there. I'm not going to waste time, mine or yours, going over individual ones right now. The 14th, I did just some accessory work for squats. I did some Hatfield squats, something I haven't done very much or really at all. So they were kind of an interesting thing. I would encourage you guys to give them a try. They're pretty tough. I did about worked up to a bunch of sets of 5 with around 300 pounds. And then I did some high bar squats just with 130 kilos just to get some work in for my legs. The following day, the 15th, I did some really quick accessory work. Just run through these fast: 4 grip, V grip pull downs, 1 arm cable rows, straight arm pull downs, rear cable delt, and wide cable curls. And I did about 5 sets of each of those, 12 to 15 reps, as high as 20 reps on some of them. And these accessory work days like this, they're kind of, if you want, you could call them bodybuilding days, whatever you feel like, because I don't do a lot of rest in between. I can bang through that amount of sets, which is quite a few. I can get through it in probably around a half an hour, maybe a little bit more. So it's I'm not trying to increase the strength on those. It's just trying to get the blood flowing into all these different muscle groups. The 16th, I did my competition paused bench press, and I had a question this week why someone asked me about why that's my competition grip, the index rings on the index fingers on the rings. And actually that's, I'm being a bit misleading saying that, because I just call it the competition grip because it's the legal competition width that you can use. That's the widest grip that you can use in competition, and a lot of people use it, and I've used it as well. But honestly, I typically have done competitions with pinkies on the rings. So I've used both. So to say competition grip, this doesn't necessarily mean this is the grip I'm going to use in competition. I'll actually decide that as we get closer. I'll make that decision based on how it's feeling and what I think at that time. But did 147.5 kilo single with that, and then did my reps 6 sets of 6 with 135 kilos. Incline press 97.5 kilos for 5 sets of 8, and then I finished up with the military press 5 sets of 6 with 62.5. And once again, the volume numbers are there if you want to see them. The 17th, another quick accessory day: hammer curls, pull downs, and cable rear delts again, 5 sets of each of those. So you'll notice there's a lot of cable rear delts in my accessory work, and stuff that I haven't put in here as well is every day I pretty much do face pulls as well as band pull aparts for high reps. It doesn't really eat into your recovery whatsoever, and it helps keep your shoulders healthy. So I haven't included it in the program, but it is something that I do on a daily basis. The 18th, I had my Spoto presses, and I did 140 kilos for a single, and I did a 5-second pause with that. So that's a pretty long pause, the Spoto press. That's probably the longest one that I would program for myself. Typically I'm more around a 3-second, and that's what I did for my reps. I did 6 sets of 6 with 120 kilos for 3-second pauses. Then I finished off with 3 sets of 20 dips for just body weight. I didn't add any extra weight to these as I have in previous weeks. So I'm going to run through the number as far as my volume and my intensity, and you'll see that as I bring them up on the screen, the graphs and stuff, you'll see some trends in the numbers that we're going through here. In week 1, my total volume was 20,180 kilograms, and week 2, 23,390 kilograms. So that's up. Week 3, it went up again, 25,728 kilograms. Now these are really big volume numbers. For most people, I wouldn't recommend doing this. This is based on my own recovery abilities. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm also not doing a heck of a lot of deadlifting and squatting and other stuff. So my recovery ability is actually pretty good. I get a lot of sleep. I get 8 to 9 hours every night pretty much. So please don't take what I am doing and put it right to yourself as something that you should be matching to. You need to be working to the volume that you can recover from, and sometimes you got to push those limits. And as you'll see in the following weeks coming up, because I'm speaking to you from the future now, I know what happens when you start pushing volume to that limit. So you have to be careful when you're pushing that you're also paying attention to what's going on. Anyways, back to the volume. Week 4, I had a slight dip in volume to 23,969, still very high, but slightly down. And then the next week, I jacked the volume back up, probably my highest volume week that's gonna be in this whole program, 26,145 kilograms. So, and you can see, looking at the graph, how the intensity or how the volume has a gradual upward trend, but is also going to have some dips in it as well. And as we get a few more weeks into this, and you can see the graphing of the numbers, you'll see how the intensity and the volume relates to itself. Going back to week 1, when we're talking about intensity, my average intensity for week 1 was 75.5%. So that's based on my projected one we're at max. Week 2 dropped to, my volume was up, but my intensity was slightly down to 70.4%. Week 3 was basically the same intensity, but my volume was up. But my intensity was 70.6 compared to 70.4 the week before. So basically identical. The next week, my volume dropped slightly, but my intensity rose from 70.6% to 79%. So it's a significant increase in your daily intensity. And then week 5 was a brutal week as far as high intensity and high volume. And that combination you will not see very often in the program. At least you shouldn't, because it'll beat you up pretty good. You're going to have it occasionally, but to have an 81.2% intensity in what I consider to be a hypertrophy block, I put in my own programming for myself, when I'm doing hypertrophy, high volume, I kind of set 80% as the top limit. Now, when I say that, I don't sit down and I don't figure my programs out by percentage. I don't figure my programs out by volume before I start. These are numbers that I've calculated after the fact. So I'm basing my program on a projected max that I want to hit, and then I work my way back on how I'm going to get there. So when I break it down, this is what actually happens with the numbers. So you can see by the graphs as we go along here with the average daily intensity, you can say day 3 is by far the lowest intensity throughout all the weeks, and day 1 is the highest except for in week 4, and that's when I had that wonky week when I wasn't in town and I went pretty heavy on my Spoto presses. So that kind of skewed things a little bit, but in general, as you look at the average daily, day 1 was the highest, day 2 was second, and day 3 was third. Some people would do that differently, where they would kind of go high, medium, or high, low, medium, to each their own. I'm just showing you what I did. I'm not suggesting what you should do. My average weekly intensity, if you look at the week 1, week 2, were both relatively low because I was just starting out in the program. So you don't want to start out full bore. Week 3 bumped it up a little bit, and then week 4 and week 5 I really went to town on it and brought the intensity up for those 2 weeks, and my volume was also up in those weeks. So when I look at the total weekly pressing volume, week 1 lowest to begin with, once again because I was just starting out in the program. Week 2 slightly higher. Week 3 was the highest. Week 4 came down slightly to give myself just a little bit of a break, and then week 5 was back up again. So at this point in time, it's time to start shifting gears. That's going to happen right away. That you can't keep your volume that super high forever, especially when your goal is to get maximum strength. You got to start bringing the intensity up, but the volume is going to have to drop. Training with high volume and high intensity for very long isn't going to work out very well for you. As we get into the next few weeks and I start shifting gears to a more intensity-based, strength-based training, you'll see what happens to the volume as we do that. So I'm going to cut it off here. We're already long again. Sorry about that. But I'm going to talk to you again next week. I hope you guys are enjoying it. Send me any questions that you want to bodyperformance@gmail.com. Talk to you again soon.